Happy Monday, my dog lovers, my pet parents, my people. So, we've got quite a windy one here in Hyattsville, Maryland today. And went for a run this morning while listening to my favorite podcast. And on the podcast today, there was a guy by the name of Ed Mylett. And he was talking about a conversation that he had had with his doctor. And this was a conversation about his heart health. Now, the doctor saw the results, and he could have rattled off a bunch of statistics to Ed. He could have talked about his cholesterol levels, his blood pressure, like his life expectancy, and all the risks associated with continuing down the same path that he was on. But he didn't. Instead, he looked at Ed in the eye and said something along the lines of, if you keep going the way you're going, somebody else is going to be walking your daughter down the aisle at her wedding. Somebody else is going to be waking up next to your wife every morning. Now, see, that was a completely different conversation, right? The doctor wasn't just giving information. He was creating leverage, right? And it got me thinking about something that dog trainers understand, have a more intimate understanding of than most people. And I say that with a little bit of hesitation too. And you'll see why soon. But as humans, we tend to seek pleasure and avoid pain in general. In dog training, we call that operant conditioning. We use consequences to influence behavior. And whether people like it or not, human beings are no different. Knowledge alone rarely changes behavior. Knowledge does not bring about the awareness to change your actions in the moment, right? Leverage does. And that reminded me of a client of mine who I will let remain unnamed, but judging by the story, I'm guessing that she'll be able to tell who I'm talking about. She owns a Staffy mix, bright dog, obedient dog, actually. Very sweet girl. But this dog has figured out that her mom is soft. When they go for walks, this dog all but tries to pull her arm out of the socket. Now, for her mom's safety, I showed her how to use a prong collar and an e-collar together so that she could safely walk her dog. And during our training sessions, she's got it. It's cool. It's good. What a great looking walk. What a great looking dog handler team. During group class, success. Looks great. The dog understood exactly what was expected. But when she gets home, she tends to text me and tell me that the dog still takes the opportunity to pull in these other environments. And I'm, of course, immediately confused, trying to figure out what is going on. And so I ask her, are you using the e-collar when she starts pulling? And she says, I don't really like using that thing. And you already know my response, because that's the whole point of the tool. The dog learns that pulling at the end of the leash produces an uncomfortable consequence. And we know that from Thorndike's law of effect tells us that behaviors followed by undesirable outcomes become less likely to occur. And that's not a controversial topic, although some people might disagree with that. But that's learning. But mom feels bad, so she doesn't use the tool. And it just amazes me how much people will suffer, even physically suffer, so their dog doesn't have to experience a brief moment of discomfort while learning better manners. The risk of a damaged shoulder is apparently not enough leverage to get the owner to use the tool that works for her strength and mobility level. And maybe she's not concerned, but I am genuinely concerned for her health and safety. A Johns Hopkins study found that more than 422,000 Americans ended up in the emergency room due to leash-related dog walking injuries over a 20-year period, okay? This is insane, first of all. But the most common injuries weren't dog bites. It was actually broken fingers, traumatic brain injuries from falling, and shoulder sprains. In other words, it's the exact type of injury that I imagine her getting every time she lets that dog drag her down the sidewalk. Imagine somebody pulling a pan out of a 400-degree oven with their bare hands. They grab the pan, they get burned, they yell, they drop the pan. And then they look at the oven mitt sitting right next to them and say, I don't like using that thing. It's ugly. Feels funny on my hand. Now, most of us would think that's ridiculous, right? That's ridiculous. The problem, obviously, isn't the pan or the oven or the burn. The problem is refusing to use the tool and following training advice designed, tailor-made to prevent the injury in the first place. But I see dog owners do this all the time. They tell me their shoulder hurts. They tell me they're tired of being dragged down the street, and they tell me they're worried the dog is going to pull them over, and they get injured. And then we find a tool that works. We teach them how to use it. The dog responds beautifully. And then they stop using the tool because it makes them feel uncomfortable emotionally. That's like refusing the oven mitt and blaming the oven. So, how do we create leverage? I think it comes down to 7 things. Leverage. Leverage. First, L. Lead with clarity. Dogs can't follow rules that constantly change. If pulling is okay on Monday and not okay on Tuesday, they can't tell what day of the week it is. Actually, they can sometimes. But if pulling is okay on Monday and not okay on Tuesday, you're not leading with clarity. You're leading with confusion. And confusion always creates chaos. That's what some people call the 3 C's. Okay, the 3 C's of leadership and obedience training with your dog. Clarity, confusion, chaos. If you're not leading with clarity, you're going to cause confusion, and that's going to create chaos in your life. Second, the E, envision. Envision the future. So it's very important that when you go out on a training session, that you have a vision for how you would want that to look. And then you go and you create that. Okay. And I see 2 futures for this client in particular. One future involves a dog that walks politely beside her without trying to charge ahead. The other future involves a damaged shoulder and thousands of dollars in medical bills. So which future are we training for? Third, the V, verify. Verify your why. Why are we doing any of this? Well, because walking your dog should be enjoyable. Because we want freedom. Because we want confidence. Because we want to be able to take our dogs places and show off the work we've put in. 4, E, engage new environments. Now, see, this is why group class matters. This is why proofing behaviors matters. Dogs need to understand that rules don't only exist in the living room. The rules apply everywhere. It's what we call applied training commands, okay? The parking lot, the trail, the pet store, the neighborhood sidewalk, everywhere. Everywhere. Fifth, the R, raise necessity. Some people change when change becomes necessary. I personally know a lot about that, but we're not going to talk about that today. Um, Not when it's convenient, not when it's comfortable, when it's necessary. Okay. You have to understand what happens if nothing changes. That's leverage. 6, the A, act boldly. Don't hide from the learning challenge. Pass that strange dog. Walk through the distraction. Take the training opportunity. Learning doesn't happen inside your comfort zone. 7, G, guard your focus. Okay. Stop worrying about what the stranger's going to think seeing you handle your dog. Stop imagining your dog is emotionally devastated because they experienced a consequence. Dogs are remarkably resilient. Most dogs get over it faster than their owners do. I guarantee that. And finally, E, evaluate and recalibrate. Training is a lot about data collection. Life is data collection. When something works, we do more of it. When something doesn't work, adjust. But don't ignore the information. Just use it. Use it. You have it, so use it. Because the biggest lesson here isn't really about, e-collars, prong collars. It's really not even about leash pulling or dog training. It's about leverage. Most people already know what they should be doing. The challenge isn't knowledge. The challenge is creating enough leverage mentally to finally do it. Whether that's training your dog, taking care of your health, fixing your finances, Lord of mercy, or having a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Knowing isn't enough. But leverage changes behavior. And once you understand that, you can start changing just about anything.